Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Come one, come all to another installment of Game Over Calgary. My name is Matt DeMille. I appreciate you all for joining me on this fine Sunday evening. Nice little matinee game for the Flames. Again, second of two nights that they've done a matinee on their Eastern Conference road trip, and it's nice for all of us to probably get home, get some sleep early on Sunday instead of staying up too late. Obviously, Flames drop another one of their Eastern Conference road trip to the Carolina Hurricanes. Final score being a 2-1 overtime loss. And honestly, to me, it seemed like that was not going to be the outcome the way tonight's game started. Obviously, I'm talking about what was a pretty abysmal first period from the Flames that just made them look tired, gassed out. And just over this Eastern Conference road trip with them being outshot, I believe it was 12-1 with after the first 20, and they didn't log a single. I believe it was they didn't log a single shot until 2 minutes and 26 seconds left in the first. So it really, you could kind of tell that, I mean, obviously this was the second of a back-to-back for the Flames. So not only were they tired, but they do look worn down from, whether you chalk it up to being at a different time zone on the East Coast or just, the toughness of a schedule like this and what they're facing. It really seemed like the Flames were at odds heading into tonight. And honestly, watching that first period, if I shut the game off and didn't watch the rest of it and somebody told me the Flames lost 2-1 in overtime, that really would be something I would have troubles believing. With that overtime loss, the Flames record is now 28-23-9 for 65 points. They are officially tied for that second wildcard spot with the Vancouver Canucks with a point today, while the Hurricanes improved to a record of 35-22-4 for 74 points, and they look like they've got a really strong stranglehold in that second spot in the Metro Division. This is the second of two meetings between the Canes and the Flames, and the last meeting of the season between the two, with the Flames dropping a 4-2 loss in the end of October. As I said, the Flames are well over halfway now past their gauntlet of an Eastern Conference road trip, and their record now sits at 1-2-1 following tonight's game. So obviously not the outcome we want, not the result we want in terms of a really crucial road trip for the Flames, but they do manage to pick up a point in, as I said, what seemed or had the notion of being a very, very lopsided outcome and the trajectory it was going. And Matt C in the chat, that was a lot of effort to get an annoying loser point. You know what? I agree. But as I said, the way tonight started and the way tonight ended, I'm happy going home with a loser point. And again, you have to consider that these guys are just off a back-to-back after getting absolutely outworked, outpaced, outscored, out-efforted, even though it's not a word, against the Florida Panthers, and to kind of bounce back from that and put in I don't know if you want to call it a David versus Goliath performance against the Canes today. I will say I'm pretty happy going home with a point, and obviously they have a day break before they reset against a pretty crucial game against Philly on I believe it's Tuesday if I'm not mistaken. And of course the same thing too, we also have to think the Canes are also playing in a second or a back-to-back game today against the Flames, and I feel like they had a lot of energy tonight considering they lost to Edmonton, who snapped their losing streak last night. So I feel like they kind of came out with a vengeance, and it showed in the first. And kudos to the Flames for really kind of hunkering down and bending but not breaking against a really strong push. And of course, Johnny Gaudreau forever in the chat. Wolfie is amazing. Yeah, he was not arguably, he was the reason the Flames kind of made it. So, it was such a close game. At that point in the game with that shots being so heavily favored in favor of the Carolina Hurricanes. We got lots to talk about in tonight's show. Obviously, a lot did go on. A lot has happened within the weekend set of games the Flames had, and a lot of topics to cover. But before we do, I feel like this is the perfect time to say shift into hyperdrive and get ready to have some fun with your new source for all the biggest stories in hockey. Bringing a unique style of broadcasting and commentary with a Quebecois flavor. Hyperdrive Hockey Hockey combines top-tier hockey analysis, big stories, pop culture, and a damn fun atmosphere that will drive debates, make you think, and more. Join Max Van Hoot, Daphne Malbuff, and Kevin Laramie every Monday and Thursday for your fill on the hockey world. Watch on YouTube on the Game Over Network channel or subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon. Head to our website, thegameovernetwork.com, for more. Now, the first segment in tonight's show is, I want to start things positive and stuff. Obviously, can't say that was, as I said, the result the Flames wanted. It's never the result the Flames wanted, and it probably wasn't the start that they wanted, wasn't the end that they wanted. But I want to keep things positive in the sense that I think this is, as I said in a stream 2 nights ago, I was really commending the Flames' culture in their dressing room and their commitment to bringing their best foot forward, regardless of kind of where they sit, who their opponent is, and obviously taking the Florida game out yesterday and not really talking about that, because that was a pretty tough performance from the boys. But I want to hammer home that tonight was another example, or this afternoon was another example of the right culture that I think is being built in Calgary. And again, I know I talked about this on Thursday's game or whichever game was against the Lightning, but I do want to hammer home this point again, because I want to commend the Flames for what they did tonight following that first period. Outshot 12-1 in the first period. Really looks like their back was against the wall. Canes were bringing it to them. And there was the option that they could have just bended, they could have broken, and they could have just mentally collapsed in on themselves and let the Canes run the score up on them. And that's kind of seemed what that first period was kind of headed. It felt like there was going to be a certain point in which Dustin Wolf kind of couldn't take this kind of pressure that was being put on him. And no disrespect to him, this would happen to any kind of goaltender, that you have that kind of period and that kind of performance with the guys in front of you. But it just felt like this game was one that could have gotten out of control if the Flames didn't kind of hunker down in that first intermission and kind of take a look at themselves. And of course, I have no idea what went on in the locker room, but they regrouped in that dressing room in the first, and they came out strong. They were arguably the better of the two teams right off the bat in the second period. Had some scoring chances, just didn't have, they ran into another hot goaltender. I think their opportunities were there but Pyotr Kochakov, I'm sure I mispronounced his name pretty poorly there, but I thought he had a fantastic game today, and he really stymied the Flames in a similar way that Andrei Vasilevsky stymied the Flames when they played Tampa Bay just a few games ago. It's just this point in the road trip where it's like, we just got shut out 2 games in a row. We haven't been able to score a goal for 2 games. We're getting outpaced. We're getting outworked for probably the fourth consecutive period, if you consider that Florida game. And I think that is what can be a turning point in this not only road trip, but again, maybe even the rest of the regular season for the Flames, because it's like, hey, we can pack it in here. And a lot of teams in this league would have packed it in. I mean, the teams that are in shambles, like me and Marek talked about in the Tampa Bay game, the New Yorks of the world, Vancouver's, Nashville's, all those guys could have packed it in, said, okay, guys, let's just play the next 40, get out of here, reset, that kind of thing. But the Flames regrouped in that locker room. And again, that culture and whatever is being built within that locker room, whether it's management or the players themselves, I'm willing to bet they looked at each other and said, guys, we cannot be putting a performance out like this based on the performance we put out last game. We need to get our stuff together here and let's bring it to them. We're not gonna outskill them by any stretch of the imagination. But what we can do is we can outwork them, we can outbattle them, and that's what they did. And again, that is really, really commendable and a great culture to have. And this goes back to Kadri's comments about them not wanting to take that loser approach where it's like, hey, let's just mail in the rest of the season, let's get a high draft pick and let's build from there. Let's build a team that has a winning culture with the guys we have now. We want to win now. We want to prove we win now. And this is another one. It seems like, especially in this road trip, that they are the David to the Goliath, but they've proven against the Caps and even tonight, they can, when they put their best effort forward and they have their legs moving, they won't outskill, they won't outclass you, but they have the opportunity to outwork you and make you pay in that sense. And again, very commendable in that sense. Matt C, I'm glad you agree with me in the chat. I agree, you can't fault the mentality and effort of this squad. We're just not quite good enough or bad enough. And that's that kind of tough spot that we're in. And I feel like this will be a segment later on in the show, but that the decision to bring in a Morgan Frost and Farabee is maybe the window that Craig Conroy had to maybe prove that it's like, we're not quite good enough, we're not quite bad enough. Let's not sell off too many assets, but let's try and propel ourselves in the right direction in terms of being a more playoff contending team. And of course, as I said, I don't want to dive into that conversation just yet, just because that is a different topic in tonight's show. But again, I don't want to keep talking about this and until I'm blue in the face, because I feel like this is going to be a conversation piece as the playoff the race to the playoffs continue. But again, you got to commend the Flames for the effort that they're putting in. They're 5 out of the 6 teams this year or in this road trip are teams that you won't be surprised to potentially see them in the Stanley Cup Finals or in the conference championships. And while they're not putting the wins together, or they're not putting as many wins together, they're proving that their effort is good enough to go toe to toe with these guys. Maybe the skill isn't, but the effort is, and their ability to keep up and compete with these guys is, and that's again very commendable for those guys. That's kind of it for the first segment of tonight's show. I wanted to keep it short, but I did want to start on a positive note. It is actually a pretty positive show, considering the outcome of tonight's game. But hats off to the Flames for today's effort, and especially coming from a back-to-back. And I really want to see whether they can take this momentum that they have, whether you call it momentum or not, and kind of put this in the right direction against a really crucial game against Philly, and of course Jacob Pelche and Andrei Kuzmenko. And in that same facet, I'm just looking at my notes, and I didn't mention that my other point to this and just the right culture is, as Matt C in the chat once again, talking about Joel Hanley's fight and him, popping, I think it was Andrei Svechnikov. It was clearly a win for him, and he really made him pay for kind of stepping up in that sense. That's something that you love to see as well with this team. They're the battlers. They're going to work hard. As I said, they're going to outwork you. They're going to try and beat you in every battle, and including if it means, dropping the mitts and stuff and sending a message that way. And I think that really did. And I think that fight in its own sense kind of helped the Flames get that push they needed to get into that overtime period as well. And at the same time, you hate to see him go down with an injury today, but I mean, there's also the sense of, like, for me, protect Kevin Ball at all costs. You hate to see him take a puck to the back of the head like he did. But without that block and without him kind of putting his body on the line, whether he meant to or not to take it in the head, I'm sure he wasn't intending to take it in the head. But the fact that he's, putting the body out, making these just integral blocks so late in the game to secure that point for the Flames just shows how committed these guys are to this playoff rush that they want to do, the playoff race they want to do, and their opportunity to get there. You don't see guys like that selling out, blocks like that, unless it's a playoff game, for example, right? So hats off to Kevin Ball. Hope he isn't down long term. That's a tough block to take, and hopefully that helmet did its job. But protect him in that sense. I think that was he's such a valuable asset to the Flames back end. And I don't want to see him go down long term, because that would be super bad for the Flames. As I said, let's change topics before I just start repeating myself, as I always do. But of course, before I do, if looking for ways to help an upstart media company employing over 30 young journalists and analysts across Canada, if you have a few spare bucks kicking around and you get head to our Patreon page at patreon.com/the Game Over Network. There you'll find multiple tiers featuring different rewards and goodies for helping us grow. There's extra access, exclusive looks behind the scenes, Discord benefits, merch discounts, opportunities to give us feedback, and you can join us for special shows live where you can interact with hosts as we launch more ways to improve your experience. If you're not able to spare a few dollars, we have a free tier available so you don't miss out. If you really want to help us, make sure you click like and subscribe on YouTube, rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, and share our work on your social media of choice. That's patreon.com/thegameovernetwork for tantalizing goodies. Heading into period 2 of tonight's show, it's kind of been a hot button topic in shows past, but I feel like this is a really good time to talk about it, considering that we did play the Carolina Hurricanes, and that is the topic of what I phrased today's portion of the show is Mikko Rantanen to be or not to be, and at the same time, I also hit it with a slash and slash score a goal. Of course, the last 3 games tonight included the Flames have obviously shown they have challenges scoring goals. And this is something that isn't a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. It is something that has plagued the Flames for most of this season. And of course, this Eastern Conference road trip and them playing the top teams in the league is, again, just another example of this weakness the Flames have in their offensive production. And a guy like Mikko Rantanen would help quite a bit. And sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. A guy like Mikko Rantanen would help, especially if you consider the Flames are tied for last in goals for, tied with Anaheim of all teams, 151 goals scored this year. And if that's not a stat that's, something worth cringing about, then I don't know what is. There's no player on the Flames this year that has 25 goals or 50 points, whereas Mikko Rantanen himself has 27 goals, 43 assists, and 70 points. And I know there's the conversation of, will Carolina have the opportunity to, not the opportunity, but does Mikko Rantanen want to stay long-term in Carolina? And it really, really seems like that's not the case. And, with the Flames sitting in the cap situation where they are, and what I mean by that is in a good situation, the Flames are second among projected cap space with approximately $17.91 million, and that's per Puckpedia. That's where I'm pulling my stats off from tonight. So, of course, if I'm mistaken there, please correct me. But let's say, give or take, they're about $18 million of projected cap space. That is second best in the NHL, and they are just slightly behind Columbus, who sits at $18.91 million, and of course that's projected. We talked about it again in the last stream. I feel like I'm reusing some of the topics, but I feel like they are good topics for tonight's game, with the Flames playing Mikko Rantanen for the first time in a while. If the Flames, the conversation is how do the Flames improve their offensive output and their opportunity to score goals. And of course, there's the conversation of drafting the right players. But if the Flames want to be in a position where, again, they're going to be that middle of the pack team, always vying for a wild card spot, it's going to take a while to draft and get these prospects to develop into goal scorers. And there's nobody on the team right now that we've already seen that can put the puck in the net like a guy like Mikko Rantanen does. And the conversation is, if Mikko Rantanen doesn't want to sign with Carolina, that means he's, either going to be dealt at the deadline, which is something that can happen. And I will say it's not necessarily a move I think the Flames need to take in, because whereas if you trade for Mikko Rantanen at the deadline, you're going to have to give up a crazy amount of assets for what could potentially be a rental piece for a playoff race or a playoff opportunity that might not even happen depending on how the cards fall for the Flames. So I don't think this is a conversation of necessarily getting him at the deadline. However, you do pose a risk that if he does go elsewhere at the deadline, he may want to re-sign wherever he goes. But in the world of hypotheticals, a guy like Rantanen reaches free agency, there aren't very many teams that have the capabilities of outbidding a guy like Rantanen. And of course, there's the conversation where if he doesn't want to come to Calgary, as you said, Matt C., we'd have to overpay drastically to get him in Calgary. I will say the Flames are no strangers to overpaying guys that shouldn't be, paid the money they will be. However, I feel like, you compare a guy to Jonathan Huberdeau to a Mikko Rantanen, and I feel like there is some sort of logical, it just makes sense to overpay a guy like him to a certain extent. And the Flames are in a relatively good position in terms of cap for the guys that are going to be needing deals at the end of this season. For the expiring unrestricted free agents, all the Flames have to worry about are Kevin Rooney, Joel Hanley, Dan Vladar, Anthony Mantha, Justin Kirkland. I feel like, depending on where Craig Conroy wants to go at the deadline, we could see some of those guys moved off as more rental pieces. So those might be chips that don't even fall this season for the Flames that they will have to re-sign. And then the expiring RFAs is probably where a lot of the money is going to go. From the projected cap that they already have, and that's the likes of Matthew Coronado, Connor Zary, Morgan Frost, Adam Klapka, and Kevin Ball. And of the 5 guys, I would want all 5 guys to stick around. So, of course, a bit of the cap is going to go over there. And then, of course, you have to pick up your depth guys here and there. But all things considered, I do think that there is a strong... There is a benefit to potentially looking at a guy like Rantanen and bringing him in, of course, to really help the Flames with their goal-scoring troubles. 1 goal in the last 3 games, being outscored 8-1 in the last 3 games. And again, I'll give credit where credit is due. They're playing against cup-contending teams. But that isn't, if the Flames want to eventually be a contender, and they're really not necessarily embracing the full-on rebuild and that loser's mentality, and they have that winning mentality, a 28-year-old Mikko Rantanen could be a viable option for the Flames. And of course, I'm talking about him specifically because we did see him in Carolina today, and he would just be a really good opportunity to kind of instantly inject offense into this struggling lineup. His contract right now, or heading into this season, he was his contract that's currently expiring was a 6-year deal at $9.25 million. And again, it is the last year on his contract before he heads into the open market. And Matt C., that's a great question. What's the highest number you'd offer Rantanen? I think it's you got to compare the other markets out there. I mean, obviously he is going to be looking for a pay grade or upgrade in pay. I wish I probably should have done a little bit more research in terms of what I think an honest and fair deal would be. But I would say anywhere in that 11 to 12 range is, I think, realistic. If you think about the other guys that are in that kind of bracket, it would make sense for him. Again, I mean, is he going to want just a $3 million raise from year to year? Who knows? I mean, obviously, I'm going to be a little concerned if that asking price is in that like high 13, 14 kind of range. But I mean, the Flames have the money to play around with it, and there are options to offshore contracts in order to kind of have that contract doable and stuff. So I don't think a $14 million contract is out of question for the Flames. Probably something I'm a little bit more hesitant on. I would like somewhere in that 12 would be a happy medium for me. So I guess best of both worlds is maybe that $13 million. And again, at 28, like I think that's kind of a deal you got to lock them up long term for. I mean, I'm obviously scared for example, like a 36-year-old Huberdeau getting paid 11 and a half or whatever he's getting paid. But whatever that max contract is, I feel like you kind of have to sign him to that if that's the deal. And of course, who else knows? I feel like Columbus would be a pretty high bidder, and depending on where you want to go, Columbus could be a viable option for him as well. But yeah, it's an interesting notion and a good conversation to be had because again, the Flames, as I said, clearly lacking any kind of offensive production. The guys on their roster now, I don't see a massive step up in an upgrade. Of course, Connor Zary and Matt Coronado, the more they kind of get accustomed to the NHL level and the older and more mature they get, of course, there's more upside in potentially. There'd be more upside in offensive production. So those are the 2 guys I'm probably looking at the most. Of course, we've got a guy like Zane Parekh, who again scored his 30th goal of the season. That will bolster a little bit of offense as well. But he's a couple seasons at the minimum away from finding a full-time spot on the Flames. So if there is like an immediate change to upgrade scoring, it would be a free agent acquisition. And of course, Rantanen is a really viable option for the Flames if you ask me. But yeah, I as I said, I think it's a good conversation to be had. It is something that is down the road, not an instant kind of need that needs to be addressed. It would be more so something in June, July. But again, something to keep your eyes on, and especially with the deadline being in just 5 days, things can change and things can change instantly, and you never kind of know what direction that's going to go in. But as we stand right now, I think it is a interesting conversation. It's something that I can't say I'm too. I would be very much open to looking at pursuing when it comes to free agency, or if there's another guy out there as well. I know Mitch Marner's, his name's been thrown around as well. But yeah, good conversation to be had. I mean, if you have any other questions or concerns about a concept like that, I mean, feel free to throw it in the comments or the comment section on YouTube. I'm happy to chat about that in more detail as well. But I figured with tonight's game against Carolina and the Flames' lack of scoring was kind of just the perfect mix for a conversation like this to be had. But we will switch gears into the third period of tonight's show as we are hitting that half-hour mark. And of course, if you're enjoying the show so far, it probably means you want more of this, right? Well, make sure you hit the like button on this video, click subscribe on our YouTube channel, and make sure you check the notification bell so you're alerted when we go live. If you're listening to our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating or even write a positive review. If you really like us, make sure to follow us on your favorite social media platforms. You can find the Game Over Network on Blue Sky at thegameovernetwork.com, on TikTok and Twitter at Game Over NHL, on Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn at Game Over Network. You can also find my social media. I'm on Twitter and on Blue Sky. I believe it's DeMille_Matthew or DeMille Matthew or some sort of variation about it. I'm sorry, I can't find it off the top of my head. But either way, you can find me on both Twitter and Blue Sky. So if you ever want to chat with me there, I also am on the Game Over Network's Patreon too, where you can chat with the entire Game Over Calgary hosts on our public network there. So if you ever want to take the conversation past our streams, you're more than welcome to join us there. And of course, you can also find us at thegameovernetwork.com, where you can sign up for our upcoming newsletter. Check and chat one more time. Johnny Gaudreau forever. Cook Connie. Yeah, I can't say he's led us astray so far, so I definitely agree with that, and I'm interested to see where the deadline goes. I can't say I'm going to expect too much going on, but I have my faith in him, and I think I've liked the moves I've seen from him so far. Mitch over Rantanen. Yeah, I think there's two sides of the coin, right? I would say two different kinds of players, and of course, asking price and the bidding war is going to make a difference too. But I mean, I can't say the Flames are going to go wrong with either type of guy if they manage to lock either one of them down at the deadline. If you ask me, where I kind of sway between both of them, I know Marner gets a lot of hate in Toronto, but from the games I've seen, and again, I can't say I've watched a bunch of games with Marner, I like his play. I think he is a phenomenal playmaker type guy, which I feel like you can never have enough of, and he's more of like a quarterback player versus it seems like Rantanen is more of a sharpshooter. But either way, I would say both guys are viable options for the Flames to potentially pursue at the deadline. Matt C, I'd rather spend $12 million plus on a center, but that's easier said than done. You're not wrong. Centers, high-end centers at the free agency, I feel like typically end up being overpaid, and they are hard to come by as well. So that's kind of tough in both senses. But, I mean, you can never go wrong with centers. And, of course, the Flames are probably in need of a top one, as great as Nazem Kadri is and as good as he was tonight. I mean, if you compare him to any other elite center in the league, I would be taking the other guy, of course. Now, period 3 of tonight's show, I kind of teased it a little bit briefly in earlier on in the show, and that was just the conversation I also wanted to have surrounding Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. And of course, the trade deadline is right around the corner, and that's been the Flames' big move and will probably be the Flames' biggest move before the end of the season and however free agency shakes up and all that jazz. Either way, pretty big move from the Flames just well over a month ago, picking up Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost. And really the conversation is, at what point do we need to start panicking about these guys and how they've been performing lately? And I'm not saying this is the time to hit the panic button. It's just, again, a good conversation to be had. And something, not only am I curious, I'm curious to know from everybody watching, but it's just something that I've been thinking about myself is at what point where do we start to panic in the sense of, is this going to work out for the Flames, and is this move going to work out for the Flames? And I don't think we're nowhere close to the panic meter just yet, or I guess hitting the max on the panic meter. Of course, looking at their stat line with the Flames, it's nothing to write home about. Morgan Frost just has 3 points, 2 goals, and assist in his first 9 games in Calgary. And Joel Farabee, 1 goal in his 9 games with the Flames. And he did take, I believe he blocked a shot in the hand, and he looked like he was laboring. So, there could be, hopefully not, but we might see him out of the lineup based on what happened today. Is it time to panic for these guys? I don't think so. Again, you have to consider that these guys are coming in, have never played with any of the guys on the Flames yet, and they got traded, played a few games, then had a 2-week hiatus, and are now back. I just really feel like they haven't been able to get their feet under them in terms of playing with the Flames and the the strategy and the way the Flames play and all that kind of stuff. As I said, I'm not ready to panic about them, and I thought they did have scoring chances today. Farabee was stopped on a breakaway. Morgan Frost had his opportunities. It feels like, I believe that it's more so a matter of the chemistry that needs to be built hasn't been built yet. There's some sort of click missing between the new guys and the current Flames and the guys that they're playing with. I think it just feels like they're not on the same page, and that seems like it's really just a matter of waiting and waiting till something clicks between these guys. Again, 9 games is not a whole lot to really get your bearings. I mean, again, we just talked about him briefly. Look at Mikko Rantanen when he first came with Carolina. Everybody was kind of making fun of the Canes that Marty Nietzsche has found instant success on Nathan McKinnon's line. I wonder why that's the case. But either way, Rantanen struggled in his first few games with the Canes, and of course he's a more elite player than Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee are. So it probably takes a little bit. It's a little easier for him to kind of get adapted to a new play style. But for these guys, again, 9 games is really not much to write about. And I mean, considering Jonathan Huberdeau, it took him about 2.5 seasons to get his bearings in Calgary. I think there's, of course, not 2.5 years worth of leeway, but I will give them a little bit more benefit in the terms of, I don't think it is time to panic. I think it is just more of a waiting to gel and let them really get their footing in Calgary. But there is when I say that, it's okay, what other options can we do to try and get these guys any short-term chemistry? And of course, they're not currently playing on the same line together, but the only chemistry that they have is with each other. So I wouldn't be opposed, and again, maybe we've seen it in the past and I'm just completely blanking on it, but I wouldn't be opposed to potentially seeing them kind of paired up in a few games, try and get at least their chemistry between each other going, because they do have a familiarity, and then they bring in another guy, and hopefully with them kind of having some sort of chemistry between each other, it really just helps the entire party in that line together. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at. I don't think it's ready to panic. I would like to maybe see them paired up together and see if they can get any short-term chemistry and just familiarity between each other going. But either way, I mean, I think if we further down the line and nothing's going on, I can't say exactly where do I draw the line at. But I would say there's 22 games left in the regular season. I would hope to see, I would hope to see the chemistry and their clickiness kind of come by game 80, 81, 82 type thing, especially if that's the way the Flames go. They might need their chemistry by that point. I see that topic has brought up a lot of conversation in the chat, so I will catch up. Farabee is concerned. Frost seems to at least have a place moving forward. Yeah, I mean, I think they've both been a little bit quiet, but Farabee for sure, 1 goal through 9 games. Again, I want to chalk it up to just a lack of chemistry and a lack of maybe even just comfort at this point. I don't want to dive too deep into it and start thinking that there is a problem, because I don't think it's the case, but I could be wrong. Frost barely scores. He's got more goals than Farabee right now. JT Miller hit the ground running in New York from Takai #1. I think that goes back to the Rantanen and the Nietzsche's thing. I think they're more of an elite player than Frost and Farabee are, so I would say I just from that conversation alone, I feel like it is easier for the more elite guys, the JT Millers, the Rantanens, the Nietzsche's, to get the ground running, because they're more of an elite player and they can pick up so easily. I feel like, of course, no disrespect to Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee, but they're not a JT Miller. They're not a Rantanen. And granted, JT Miller does have, it was years and years ago, but he does have some sort of comfort to New York with him starting. I believe he started his career in New York. Either way, I feel like it's the different type of player and their kind of talent and their kind of what point, like, echelon they are, right? And I think they're just not in the same conversation in terms of how elite they are and how easy it is to pick it up based on how elite they are. And I think that's why guys like Miller have found success versus these guys. I mean, look at like Pelche, for example. Like I don't want to. I might eat my own words here, but I feel like I haven't heard much from him in his time in Philly, but that is just speculation, and I don't have any stats to back up that argument. So feel free to bury me with a comment like that. I don't mind. Always chances and never in basket. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, even today, I feel like the pair of them could have had 3 goals between each other and they just couldn't bury. Like, they did all the work, but couldn't get the job done. Still ahead of Vancouver in the table is a plus. Absolutely. I think they're tied with them now with the same amount of games, but that point tonight was absolutely crucial. We are hitting the 38-minute mark in tonight's show, so I feel like this is a really good opportunity to kind of kick it to the Q&A. Conversation in the chat has been super lively today. So if you do want to chat about anything else from today's show, what's to come for the Flames, or just anything in general, now's your time to throw it in the chat and we can address it, have a conversation. But before I do, of course, I just wanted to give our merch one more plug because it's that fantastic. And of course, there's no better way to support something you love than by repping it on yourself. Game Over's apparel line has dropped, and with 3 unique designs. Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, want to make a statement with our established design, want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live and die by the goalie design, or if you just need another cup of coffee and a toque to get you through the winter, we have you covered. Designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Use the QR code on stream now and take a look through our apparel store and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada while repping your community. Going back to the Q&A portion, Matt C., I don't like Farabee's contract. Still got 3 years left at $5 million, but then we have to sign Frost end of this year too. I mean, is the 3-year $5 million tag great? I liked the fact that we had him on tenure just because I feel like like trading a guy like Pelche and a guy like Kuzmenko just for 2 rental pieces is something that would concern me in terms of both of them could potentially walk. I mean, Frost is an RFA, so there's a lot more steps for him potentially walking. But for Farabee specifically, with him having 3 more years left on his contract, or 2, or however many he has left, he isn't a rental. He's a guy that's going to be around Calgary, and you do have time to see him out. And of course, I mean, is he worth $5 million? He's only playing 9 games with Calgary so far, so I can't say that he's worth that price tag currently. But I do think there is a benefit to having guys with still remaining time on their contracts and stuff, because again, we could have potentially lost him as a UFA this year, like other rentals in the past. So it feels like this isn't a rental acquisition, and this is a guy that Craig Conroy knows. He's like, I want to build this team around him. And again, we've only seen a small sample size. At the end of this season, start of next season, I could be eating my words. But the way we stand right now, I'm not concerned. And I actually do like a little bit of time left on his contract. And of course, for us being an RFA is super useful for Calgary with the negotiation and stuff. Potentially get him signed, I wouldn't, maybe long term, but at least a few more years out of him. I would like to see both of them stick around for at least a couple more seasons to test the waters a little bit more. But yeah, I like the contract, and of course the Flames are not strapped for cash either, and they've got more than enough money for their salary cap and stuff too. So I think this is the time that the Flames are right now, and how much they have banked. I'm not super opposed to the contract. Again, I think the conversation that you're probably having, Matt, is whether he's worth that $5 million price tag, and that's only time. But currently where the Flames sit, it's not something that I'm losing much sleep about, to be quite honest with you. But again, I feel like a lot of this conversation is based on, like, it's only a matter of time until we really do see the effects of this trade and stuff, because it's only 9 games in, right? What's on deck for the Flames? Their road trip continues. They head to I believe Philadelphia for a game on Tuesday. Today is Sunday, yes. They are back or not back in Philadelphia. They continue their Eastern Conference road swing, their gauntlet of a road trip in Philly. Arguably the easiest of the 6 games on the road. And of course, an emotional one, as it's the first game against Jacob Pelche and Andrei Kuzmenko since the trade as well. So there will be a lot riding on it, and it's probably a little bit more meaningful than a game between Philly would normally be. And of course, as I said in the last stream I was in, I feel like that is, I don't like labeling it as a must-win game, but it feels like a must-win game for the Flames. Easiest team on paper on the schedule. Or on the road trip for the Flames, and it seems like if they do want to come home successful after this road trip, I feel like picking up a win against those guys is super important. I will be on the call along with Conrad, so we will be both tag teaming it as host and co-host. So make sure you tune in for that. I don't see any more comments in the chat, so I think we're gonna shut our stream down tonight. Oh no, Takai number 1 slid one more in. I love it. Who is our biggest trade bait? I would say after his performance against Florida yesterday, I think it's Dan Vladar. I think it's been Dan Vladar for most of the season, to be quite honest with you, especially with teams looking for like a 1A, 1B, or I would say Vladar is a 1B type goaltender. I don't think he's the backup goaltender quality. I think he's a little bit higher, but I don't think he's necessarily a bona fide starter. And of course, considering the performance that he had against Florida yesterday and some of the saves that he made that were just absolutely spectacular, I would say like his trade value skyrocketed from yesterday alone. So I think of the guys currently on the Flames roster, I think he's probably the biggest trade bait one. And I think he put a lot of teams on notice with a performance like that are looking for, as I said, that 1B, type goaltender. So in terms of trade bait, I think he's number 1. Do I see him being dealt at the start of the season? I'm still on the wagon. I'm still on the wagon that the Flames do need to trade Vladar. I think his value is quite high right now. And again, as I said, yesterday's performance against Florida definitely helped that as well. They said in sports, or the intermission of tonight's game between Ryan Leslie and Eric Francis, they said Craig Conroy is still sticking to the message he had at the start, or the goals he had at the start of the season, and regardless of where the Flames are sitting right now, he still wants to follow through with it. And I hope one of what Conroy's goals were potentially finding a new home for Dan, because I do think his value is quite high. So I hope they follow through with that as well. The time's ticking now. There's only 5 more days until the end of the regular season to do something there. Who knows though? I like the idea of him potentially being a rental, as he is an expiring UFA at the end of this season. So it would be tough to deal him at any point past the trade deadline. So if there is something that needs to be done, I think it needs to be done now. If there are any more questions, I feel like now's the time to fire it in the chat, and I would be happy to address it. If not, I will be more than happy to shut tonight's stream down so we can all get to bed relatively early tonight as well, and get some sleep before a busy week for the Flames and for everybody else too. As I said, I will be on the call along with Conrad for the Flames game on Tuesday against Philly. Emotional one nonetheless, so make sure you tune in for that. And yeah, Flames got 2 more games left in their road trip before they come home. After Philly, it's a game against Dallas, and again, Dallas, we know Dallas as the juggernauts of the Western Conference, along with the likes of Winnipeg and even Minnie and stuff too. So Flames must win. I will label it as a must win game against Philly. Make sure you tune in for that. And as I said, both Conrad and I will be on the call post game as well. So make sure you join us for another great stream as well. Appreciate everybody in the chat tonight for coming in and chatting following tonight's game against the Hurricanes. Always appreciate the conversations. Of course, Johnny Gaudreau forever, Matt C, it's a guy number one. Appreciate you guys always in the chat. Really enjoy our conversations. And as I said, I hope to see you guys on Tuesday. So make sure to tune in for the Flames, and I will see you then, I guess.